What is it all about?
What's the meaning of life?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Why are we here?
It turns out there might be some really good, deep reasons for why we are here. Actually, we are here for Grant and me. We still have 4:30. Wait for 4:30. Yeah. So, my bio doesn't have my date of birth. Just telling you.
You can write it in.
No, okay. My publisher, he was born in 1925. Not kidding. So, you know, like his bio says that. So he's like 96, 97 years old, but if you're rich, you last forever. Okay. And you publish books and you get a tax break, I think. Oh, it's one more minute before I'll introduce Mr. Sawyer.
To introduce Mr. Ali.
So, Sawyer, is this your real name?
It is.
It
yes.
is, okay. So your parents were Mark Twain fans?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
They were, or you're just making this up right now?
Improv. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
So, you know, with humor, it's like you have to do a lot of tea before you can be funny, and I didn't have enough tea today, so sorry. My child is here, and some people I know aren't here. My wife is not here, that's a good thing. She's somewhere in the building. All right. So
I'll
Sawyer will introduce me, and then
introduce you.
yeah.
Okay. So I'm Sawyer. I'm part of the English Student Undergrad Council for the department. And we put on events like this, where we have poetry readings. We also do community events. We're just about building conversation and community within the department. And so, I'm going to introduce Ali Hasan. He's the author of 3 books of poetry, not 2, as it says on the website, but 3. And they are Grieving She, 67 Mogul Miniatures, and Sorrow of the Warrior Class. His poems have appeared in Agni, Shenandoah, and Crazy Horse. A small selection of his poems have been archived on the Poetry Foundation website. Currently, he's working on his 4th book of poetry, The Age of Science. He's originally from Pakistan and came to America in 1991, and he received his MFA from Syracuse University. And we all know that he teaches here. So.
That's all true. So now I'm going to get nervous. Oh, more people are coming in. Hi. All right. And I might need to use the chalkboard, so I might put some equations right there. So, oh, I know what I'm going to do. So we'll just. So what happened is I had this feeling that poetry wasn't the right thing for me, and that I should switch in my deep middle age to science. So I went and started doing calculus. I had to do algebra first, trig, and I was teaching my little daughter over there math. Then I did some, so calculus I did was from Khan Academy, if you guys are interested, which is kind of not really real calculus. And then I did some differential equations. This summer I spent time on physics. For 2 months I did physics, and it took me forever to do 3 chapters. Something that people do in 2 weeks took me 2 semesters, 2 months. And so what's happened is that these poems are in response to my engaging with math and physics and the sciences in a very real sense of actually doing it and then doing poems. So that's what's going on. And we can start. So my first poem is called Against Nihilism. And I'm going to read around 8 poems. So, the whole business about this poem is to give us some kind of a hope that we survive after we die, because God doesn't exist, religion doesn't work out for most of us. So what is hope? Right? The real meaning of life. So it turns out that right before and this is a scientific speculation, right before our universe came into being, a bunch of basically an infinite number of other universes came into being right at the same time. Okay? which that means that there has to be, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them, statistically speaking, that are identical to the universe we live in. Therefore, there are copies of me and all of you and this room in some other alternate universe, and I'm trying to be funny and failing over there too. Okay, so that's what's going on, which means that when I die, my copy is still going, and when he dies, there's another copy, which means that we are immortal and like Highlander, and there can only be more than one in this case. Okay, so I need to speed up here. Against nihilism, to quote just one of our avatars, and this is a sonnet and it's rhyming and all of that stuff. To quote just one of our avatars of the science god, my only hope lies in inflation before the star-inducing Big Bang, in the lopping off of multiple copies of ourselves and universes in the multiverse. For no matter what I do, the biking paths, the Mobius strips of my bikers eventually doodles into a narrow collar of a local universe. Don't be put off, I tell myself, by the inky smell of science. Be heavy on the carbon copies, for the heavies are not villains out to get us, to tame us. No, not at all. They, ourselves, all game. So, you guys are hopeful now? It's all going to work out. It's a tame and game rhyme. It's a Shakespearean sonnet. Let's move on. So this is called core functions. And a function is basically a relationship between two things, right? This is x and y. You can write a function like this. So this is the independent variable, this is the dependent. What you change this, the value of y changes. Or you can call y like this. So when I'm saying x is a function, I'm talking about this. When I say I'm talking about function x squared, x cubed, the key point here is that this function, when you graph it, becomes a straight line. When you graph this, it's a curve. Okay, and then the cube is like that. All right, so, and this is one of the most important poems ever written on this very important issue. And it's basically a rip-off of Eliot's poem, The Journey of Magi. So let's see. Core functions, mangled, left for dead by the mathematical elite, had been on a long journey. Refractory, like Eliot's camel. Read Eliot's The Journey of the Magi. Insistent, switching out tea for coffee. Insistent variations on the single theme of X, that guy over there. And then, of course, mathematicians don't drink tea, they drink coffee. They need the jitters. Let's see, where was I? Sorry. Core functions, mangled, left for dead by the mathematical elite, had been on their long journey, refractory like Eliot's camels, read Eliot's The Journey of the Magi, insistent, switching out tea for coffee, insistent variations on the single theme of X, some powerless, as in X, weary countenance lined, straight line, others squared, cubed, as in X squared or X cubed, the curvy loveliness for the mathematically inclined. Some were utterly changed, reciprocals of the original selves, as in 1 over x, others withdrawn, inward, not searching, but splitting into roots, as in square root of x, through the axial age, refracted, reflected, compressed, shifted, or stretched across the cross of time, and in the new dispensation, acceptable to the commoners. Just their journey through time. And all right, so let's move on. This is called displacement, which is the shortest distance between 2 points. displacement, an idea from basic physics where the path or possible paths are seen as polite conversation non-starters. Things like actual miles traveled, trip to the consulate, visa, passport, picture, connecting flights, layovers, stretching of legs, pretzels, fizzies are real things, or the more traditional shipping containers, treacherous inclines, crying babies, very traditional, horseback, blanket-laden passes, getting stuck in Istanbul for 3 years, where an etiquette of the imaginary straight line rules the displaced person, the result of the mathematical operation of final position minus initial, imperiled, imperialized, his initials and beginnings, as well as his roots, his travels. He is no Ibn Battuta or Marco Polo, erased from his papers, his final position, final. Man, in the final tally, his run to the pizza store and back, common physics textbook example, I'm lying about this one, his trip to the moon and back, planting the flag, etc., or generally civilization's 10,000-year displacement and back, man should count himself very lucky that we have been able to keep our civilization going for around 10,000 years. It's pretty impressive. Okay. It's going to all end, so that's the bad news. Okay. And it's coming, you guys are going to witness it, hopefully I'll be dead. So, I don't want to see the end. Okay. You too, you will be enjoying the end. All right. He's young, so I hate young people, sorry. Wave interference. So let's see, wave interference. So it's like a cool title, yeah. Okay. Of all the different kinds of double speak, introducing the double slit experiment, which was actually a real experiment, to the world was clearly a mistake. Decidedly not as villainous as introducing carbon into the air, but still, now that the world has become decidedly bleak, to speak of wave interference is to speak of an experiment too often set up, run, and tweaked. Often abandoned on the beach is experimental machinery from Bolt and Lightning Co., who also do tidal pools, is only double trouble for the wayward surfer waves, fluming minority, cresting majority. Double trouble comes from this really cool restaurant in Louisville, Double Happy, Chinese place, excellent. Let's move on. This one's called Fundamental Theorem of Calculus. And for this, we just need one little equation here. So d of dx. See, I'm so smart. Actually, I never took not calculus, but physics. Okay, so this is basically the fundamental theorem of calculus, and it's in here in the poem, so I'm putting it there. And the idea is that two very different things, calculating the area, which is called integration, is the same or very deeply connected to the idea of calculating speeds or rates of change, which is differentiation. And so what happens is when you differentiate, this is the differentiating an integral, you get the function back again. So there is a portal, a connection between two realms of calculus that are supposedly very different but connected. So, the idea of the poem is to go into literature, like two different authors, and bring metaphors that work for that. I'm trying to compare that to metaphors from Yeats' poem and C.S. Lewis's wardrobe. Because in the wardrobe, you step in from one realm, you go into the other realm. And this equation takes you back and forth, kind of. Of course, I might be wrong about all that. There's this mad guy over there looking at me. Okay. So, The other thing is, I haven't done any math for a month, so I'm already forgetting all this stuff. So the fundamental theorem of calculus, that's the title. The YouTube demo of its proof in its almost 14-minute duration is forthright. Squeeze theorem coming in at the right time, playing its requisite role. No chicanery here. The proof is as pedestrian as it gets in mathematics. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is the surprise. For the fundamental theorem of calculus itself can come as a shock to many, especially version 1, apparently. That's that one. And then ludicrous. Oh yeah, d over d of dx of the definite integral a to x of f of t dt equals fx. Ludicrous, like C.S. Lewis's wardrobe. It is very foolish to shut oneself into any wardrobe, not quite like those sages standing in God's holy fire, ready to gather Yeats into the artifice of eternity, ready to gather the motion of illimitable secant lines into mackerel crowded rectangles under the curve. So there's a bunch of lines that I just put in italics from Yeats. Okay, next is time. I'll set the timer. I'm running out.
You've been going for 14.
Yeah. Okay. Shit. I'll just go to 20 then. Okay, I will have to skip something. Let me read. Oh, okay, I'm down to 3 more points. I'm doing good. We're going so fast, actually. So this is called digital logic design. Back in the day when I did computer science undergraduate, unfortunately, and so we had to take a digital logic design class where we made digits, AND gates, NAND gates, and then you have to do the algebra with it, all of that stuff that Pakistanis have to do when we get here. So what I'm doing in this poem is talking about that class, but basically comparing a circuit board and rushing or pacing of electrons in that to the Atari video game, the Pong, where you play table tennis, to Rilke's Panther poem in Bly's translation. So all these metaphors then kind of roll down here. So let's see. Each unit of the self-paced course ended on a non-durational artifact, like an evening of struggle, a pacing of electrons in the circuitry, a form transcendent, heightened by algebraic equations per age of science that rages about me, with the intensity and luminosity of the 2 pixelated bars about me, making me the Pong of Atari's Pong, dating me and this poem, hit me baby one more time, like a bad karaoke night out, Britney Spears and table tennis, the ping and pong and ping of Rilke's Panthers pacing in a cage of pixelated bars, moving up and down, Bly's translation, cagey, circuitous, wary, catching me gazing. So I've got 2 more and then I'm done. Come on, Marty, you can come in. It's just me. Okay, so this is called the Xcomponent. And it's my reaction to that terrible movie called Hidden Figures, which demonized the Russians and said that if all Americans hated the Russians together, we'll give you jobs. So, I hate the Russians too. So, anyways, so what you're looking for in this poem is dissolution, the word dissolution, decomposition, fissure, fission, fusion, fused, fussy. Fussy means caring. Okay, it does somewhere. The X component. We take our human limitations to the very heart of the mechanical world. In mechanics, for instance, a 2D conundrum, imagination's impasse, is never taken head on. Our helmeted motorist think Che on his motorcycle tour, or see Bernal in Motorcycle Diaries, 2004, rated R. Rather than deal with Santiago's rush hour, Bernal runs into a quieter by-lane, turns into a quieter by-lane, only to be rapturously received by his Russian seers, who pull off their Soviet triumph for his and our edification. Sorry, I'm losing it. Let me try this again. By his Russian seers, who pull off their Soviet triumph for his and our edification, the Union's dissolution, still far in the future then, on a simple decomposition of Sputnik's orbital into its X, Y, and Z components, relying on the fissure of reality, the built-in fission of its proto-astronauts, dropping Hiroshimas, not at all like Raising Arizona, 1987 PG-13 with Nicolas Cage, or the necessary fusion, coalescing, fused reality of its fuzzy cosmonauts, raising Leninsk in Kazakhstan around a cosmodrome. Okay. Now for the brilliant ending, this is the poem. Newton's first law of motion, and what you want to watch out in this poem, and this is the last poem and then I'm done, is the refrain. So the refrain is, with constant velocity, zero acceleration. Cool refrain. And then the poem redefines Newton's first law of motion. So Newton's first law of motion goes like this. A body acted on by no net force has a constant velocity, which may be zero, and zero acceleration. And so I redefine this for us in the humanities as unfelt motion, serenity itself. Isn't that much nicer formulation of something that's really important and basically dictates our lives, the first law of motion according to the poem. Also, the universe is described as an inertial hospice. Because we're all dying, and since constant motion means we're not going anywhere because it could be zero acceleration and zero speed. So, universe is an inertial hospice, and then also look out for inertial oddities, and that is the idea of God and religion. And the other thing that the poem says in the end, right at the end, is that because of the first law of motion, poetry is also possible, and it allows us to lament and mourn our existence. So Newton's first law of motion does not come with a formula to memorize, thank God, like the other two. From the 14th edition of Sears and Zimansky's University Physics, calculus-based, unfortunately, with modern physics, relativity, quantum mechanics, cosmology extra, by authors, who the hell were Sears and Zimansky then, Hugh D. Young and Roger A. Friedman, and the contributing author A. Lewis Ford, Amazon price $259.55. It's $259.55. And here's the law from the book. A body acted on by no net force has a constant velocity, which may be zero and zero acceleration. It's the Goldilocks of physical laws of motion. Making love, or burglaries, or silver candlesticks, or the musical Les Miserables 2012 with Anne Hathaway, possible. Disallowing shifting sands or staircases of Dark City 1998 with Rufus Sewell, or that actress, what was her name, from House of Sand and Fog 2003, or for allowing forgetting or looking up, Jennifer Connelly, or dropping a large mercury mirror and shattering it where you stand in the kitchen, or not leaving the Indian Ocean behind as the earth hurtles on, refrain, with constant velocity and zero acceleration. We're not going anywhere. Or misunderstanding chance or mischance as gratis, as peace on earth, as the first law, as defined here, as unfelt motion, serenity itself, making for inertial oddities, like the absentee clockmaker, that's God, who circles with constant velocity, zero acceleration, his clocks in a tomb-like motion. As firestorms on surfaces of his suns go unheard, our local clock at sunrise soundlessly dispatch its photons at the speed of light in vacuum. C equals 2.9979245 times 10 raised to power 8 meters per second. This is a universal physical constant that charges itself into its 12 o'clock place in the inertial hospice. Though the suns do heat things up, even serene inertial things, only on surfaces of exoplanets, other Beijings, where the reign of Newton's first law of motion is absolute, cling loud lamentations, sticky as noise, figuring into inertial scheme of Bolshoi's ballets, purling death as sounds necrosis. And that's all, folks. Thank you. And these are, by the way, John's books.
This is Grant's book.
Yeah, this is John's book.
This is Grant's book.
Yeah.
So next we have Grant Souders. I think we'll be doing questions at the end. Some of you may know Grant as your instructor. Other people might know him as the person behind the desk over there. Or you might know him as a writer. Grant Souders is the author of the chapbook Relative Yard and a collaborative book with Nathaniel Whitcomb and Matthew Sage, A Singular Continent. In 2014, he joined Matthew Sage in editing Patient Presses, including their chapbook series and their quarterly digital magazine, Window. Recently, his poetry has appeared in the Boston Review, Jubilat, I.O., Omniverse, Denver Quarterly, Paperbag, and other venues. His first-length collection, Service, is out on Tupelo Press. His visual art has appeared at a variety of galleries, and he received his MFA from the University of Iowa's Writers' Workshop, where he was a Maytag Fellow. Grant Souders.
Hey everyone. Thanks for coming out. It's really nice.
Yeah. So many of them. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah. I don't have anything clever to say, I just have poems.
Shit.
Yeah. So I'll say a little bit about this book. It's sort of conceived as a creation myth. The first poem begins in nakedness, and then towards the end it's in the cosmos, and then in death. But the title of the book comes from when I was, a small child. My grandfather gave me this book of poems by Robert Service, but the binding had fallen off, and he rebound it in this deer hide from a deer he'd killed, and in the side on the spine he had carved Service. And it was like this ominous tone to me. So I was like afraid to read, even though Service is like Robert Service is a fun poet. So I'm going to read from this in the spirit of published works, and then I'll move on to the dodgy works, though I don't know that published works of mine are not also dodgy. I'm going to read poems now. This first poem is called Eater. I mound my mouth with almond, automobile, thicket thorn, mud god. It was those things I was thinking, each small god I was thinking and looking. There is a room in the bouquet. There is a window in the room in the bouquet. To go to the peeling back of things, there is enough room, rough room, all silk and buzz. I go out of. Out of the window in the room in the bouquet, there is a street. The street is a banquet. There are animals at the banquet, animals in rows. There is a wolf with eyes that is an animal and a man that is an animal with eyes. There are other animals with the man and the wolf in the street, which is a banquet. They are eating almonds and automobiles and thicket thorns and gods. These things are in their faces where they eat them. And their faces are the things they eat. But before they eat them, they hold them. They hold them in their hands, paws, appendages. If you'd like, we could join them. There would be the things then in our faces where we eat them and hold them. This next poem is called Zenith. There's a lot of poems that end in ER. I think that kind of goes with the service as like a job, as a vocation, one who zeniths. Zenither. Though tickled and trucked by sights until now unforeseen, of course, how else? Could we notice the pallid shells of us, we could climb up higher, there at the top of a neighboring roof. How I wish we could levitate more than none, unaccompanied by the naming of seconds, animals, whatever, yet we want out the simple intentions to see elsewhere and thus confirm our little profile. And a little farther than further. We could touch a different piece, and I suppose we do see so. Another ER poem, pair, or like one who pairs things together. Pair. There is an insect boring its children into dark. The desk my hand built, the tree built. A home for the borer and houser, yet touched water as though to feel your own disruption. There was a crow's nest where I saw nothing but water. It turns out I've said nothing at last. Glistener, as in one who glistens. Glistener. Listener, it is nice to watch the people go by, and the lightning not overhead, but far enough in distance to be careless of. I like that there is song, too. Sometimes one can hear these songs being sung, even if by the city buses pushing the air, they are just now overtaking. Some nights, I am that bus. I'm going to read this poem called The High Dive, and it has nothing to do with the shady bar venue in Denver. It has to do with a public pool in Thermopolis, Wyoming. But check it out sometime. The High Dive. We forget backwardly how deep is the pool. What you mean is I should invent and to understand my invention. A parade of painters, unlimited in their techniques, carried a banner behind them. It read, "Things come to us." We gave them due credit. We told them they were interesting and that we were glad that they had come. Each painter was setting up an alcove, which gave a specific size to the public pool's domain. One set a painting against a sunny portion of chain-link fence. He could be overheard, I was told, repeating himself. Apples for a while will live on branches. The signs are sparring in the sky. The kids are on each other's backs, the taller ones on the bottom turning through the shallow end. To make the height most dangerous. From here I can see the rabbit on the other side of the fence. In fact, I realize there are several rabbits. And more distantly is a series of buildings, varying in height. So I wrote a few poems called Airplane, and then a few poems called Astronaut. So I'm going to read the first Airplane poem after I get some water. Airplane. By law, I am an airplane, and there is gravity to resist me exactly. I've learned that all things have gravity, or all things with mass have gravity and are always trying to pull closer, but there is something else. Maybe a larger mass to which I am unaware. Inside me, there is a notebook with words. It asks, what is behind the stars? It contains a drawing of a head-sized hole. Someone, not me, brought me this notebook with its words and drawings into me. Its mass and mine is a compound mass. The singularities are permanently lost. Mine, its. There are things some have said that have no mass. These massless particles, if they can be called that, pass through us, the cockpit, cabin, wings, etc. Not to mention the notebook and the words and drawing inside me. Yes, they pass through the head-sized hole and the seat backs where some rest their heads. I have not smelled my own insides. I have not smelled the orphan notebook. Come inside and tell me about it. The things pass through us and I believe it. But having no mass leaves me curious. The massless particles pass through us. They must not have gravity, emanating outward from their source somewhere in the universe. There is the universe, I think. Sometimes people enter me and speak. You might see now how I get caught up here. So I'm from Houston, Texas, which was recently devastated by Hurricane Harvey. This poem does not have anything to do with that per se, but a little bit with Houston. I grew up near Ellington Airfield, where space shuttles would land. Astronaut. There is no Houston anymore. I toured the circumference of everything I could imagine, and it wasn't enough to make me want less or more. I know that my legs will be weak when I return. In fact, all of my muscles will be atrophied from the lessening of gravitational force. Most think there is no gravity in the space between Earth and Moon. There is gravity everywhere. There is mass. Then there is no mass. There is no king with his knuckles wrapping the red-armed chair and the unraveling. There is no subject, no pilot hearing his echo in the mask with his oxygen level stabilizing. No returning to more native atmospheres in this descent. There is not enough time. There is only enough to make us want. Astronaut. This pilgrimage I have awoken from. When I left, light where I returned. Here I am things. Of willows lining the bank of some creek calling out from where I cannot see. When we are vulnerable, you see. The willows calling out, must we leave too of it? The willows of it? Thinking of them sprouting out from the bank, some naked where deer have gnashed away at the swellings too of it. Is horizon as grasses and beetle kill into? What have we awoken to say our name? That poem borrows from Solaris, the film, not the George Clooney version, and Psalm by George Alvin. All right, I'll read one more poem from the book, and then I'll read a few new poems. This poem is called Vocation, and it's the last poem in the book. There is a gathering of gravestones across from the graveyard. In the earth are the gravestones still, smoothed by the man who smooths gravestones. I imagine there is a man who buys these stones for the party concerned. They choose the smooth stone from this man and purchase. The man who buys takes the money from the party who are sad or tired or not to give to the man who smooths. The man who buys gives the stone to a man he knows at the other end of town. This other man practices his vocation, a rare vocation. He holds a blade to the stone with a name in mind. The name has been passed down from the party, given to the man who buys stones, who in turn writes the name for the man with his vocation. He holds the name in mind with the blade in hand to put the name to the stone purchased days ago. What he holds now, he cuts and knows nothing of the name. New stuff. So these poems have all been written in the last week. One of which I showed one poem to one person, and they said they hated it. So we'll see how that goes.
And I show all my poems to this guy, and he never shows me anything.
This poem is called "The Ducks Help Me to Understand." Meanwhile, the ducks work to specify our suffering. They're dummy, decoy friends, though they're not real friends, are they? Are still sitting still, miles away in a sort of apt mockery. This little pond doesn't even have a name. And dare they, the ducks, have names? Look, another twiggy twig, alas and ha. The air smells like what the water has done to it. Big deal, say the ducks, off now and again. They've landed on a sphinx, their shit streaking its sides. The sphinx asks, is there water nearby? The ducks reply, we're not taking any questions. Constantly overhead, flying off lovelessly and longinglessly away because they don't even look at you, and they could. This poem is called "A Curse on the Way to Heavenly Beach." We take the avenue south. The air sweeps your shirt, and the lizard, back in its crease, will have none of it. May the world be plentiful, and your desires endless. Okay. This is the one. This is called "This Is What Happens with a Bear."
I loved it. I haven't seen it.
This is what happens with the bear. Coming preen through the yard, grabs a safe whiff of air, a stick of butter, and there it takes a moment to speak. Yes, I like rooms that are vast. Those which are ones where you cannot see at least one of the walls, of which generally there are 6. Yes, I like rooms filled mostly with silence, but we know 4 minutes and 33 seconds into it that we might get what we don't want. There is a river near here that I've just come from, and I saw you, brother. I saw you pausing and swelling like a berry. Did I mention how much I love berries? I live on them, and I saw you, brother, and I was living. I saw you, and I saw you more than I've ever seen in this vast, vast room. This last poem is called Practice. Thank you to Sawyer for introducing. Thanks to Ollie for reading with me. All the invitation. Thank you for showing up and being a wonderful audience. Here's practice. Beneath the council tree, you summon the guilt of forgetting. You have your eyes and you are alive. You have the shade and limited control. You have your breathing. You have the atmosphere which, on days like today, tastes like the tree you sit beneath and leaves you, and you love it. You have love and lovers. You have a walk and you take it. Eventually, you have alms and meaning's burden. You have an ox that has an illness. You have time which grows like illness. You have a century to share. You haven't a moth, though there are many of them turning in the light. You have little light, but it's enough. You have the tradition of sentences. You have an appetite and a refrigerator that opens with light. The refrigerator has barely any fruit. The council tree does not bear fruit. You walk in the little light you have and have a bite. You have forgotten the fruit, its juice in your gut, and you have a dance you are dancing. You have a gourd and a palm. You have thirst and rest. Then you have work to be done. You have what you have to do, and you do what you have to do before you forget it. Thank you.
So I think we wanted to do a couple minutes for questions for Ollie and Grant, and so this is pretty loose structure, but if anyone has questions, you can just raise your hand.
Please have some questions. And I do show my points to actually Grant, and he goes, good, otherwise I chuck him out. It's true. This poor guy has been reading my poems 1 poem per week for the last how many months?
Yeah.
But sometimes the revisions. Yeah, sorry about the revisions.
Can
So,
I ask Grant a question?
yeah.
I'm sorry I was walking late, I had a prior obligation, but the graveyard one or the gravestone one, it sounded like it could have been a villanelle with the repetitive lines. Yeah.
I like writing poems with a very limited vocabulary. It's like this kind of restraint that for me clarifies the meaning of the word while simultaneously like expanding the meaning of the word. Like kind of like Gertrude Stein's.
It wasn't a villanelle though, right?
No.
But like that's the way that villanelles like constrict the amount of vocabulary in a poem. Is kind of like something you were going for.
Yeah.
Right on. Cool, thanks.
I have a question. If we wanted to buy your book to support local poets, How much would it cost?
A suggested donation of 10 US dollars.
That's a really good price.
Yeah, it's market prices.
17?
$17.
Thanks for this.
I'm sure for Ali.
Yeah.
If
Find
you
it.
could invent a new branch of science based on all this research and poetry you've done, what would it be? Or like, what do you think science should be doing that it's not doing?
Oh, well, there's this poem that I didn't read about how string theory, and you can't, because you need money for big science, and so they can't do the experiments to prove it. So science is moving towards being speculation or more like philosophy and meditation and stuff like that with mathematics. But no, so this is just a poet doesn't really think; he just uses other people's thinkings. So some other people think, scientists do science, and the poet is supposed to put feeling, how he reacted to it emotionally onto this. So no, there's nothing coming out of this. I mean, I could start the new Scientology out of it. Right? With the, who was it, Herbert guy? It was a bet between two guys that could we use his science fiction novels to start a religion, and then Tom Cruise got involved, and it just no, it's just my reactions to doing math at middle age, slow brain situation. The math was okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have a separate questions for both of you. So Ali, I'm so sorry I'm late, but and I'm sorry if you already said this or explained it, but how much did math come out of your interest in form and what is form?
And then
Or how is it related? Or
Okay.
should I just ask Grant's question or just wait?
then I'll answer and then you ask Grant. I think that will work out. So the thing is, for my first two books were just free verse, which is kind of like haunted by the form, and so I just felt like a cheat, like I couldn't do form. So for my last books, Sorrows of the Warrior Class, I did sonnets, like 9 of them, and they weren't just 14 lines, and I wasn't just calling them sonnets. They were actually rhyming sonnets and Petrarchan, and then the only thing that I cheated with was I was just counting syllables. So I went from 9 to 13. I wasn't really. I was just going with that. Of course, since I read mostly metered poetry, the iambic rhythm will be there. So I did that. I wrote stanzas, rhyming stanzas, couplets, the whole thing. And then for this one, it turned out those sonnets wouldn't work. And the form that worked for math and physics and science was, and also basically I read a lot of James Merrill. And James Merrill, his early work was lyrical and very controlled and tightly controlled. And his later work is where he just opens up, and it's very conversational. And I wanted to do something conversational, and for that, the form that I needed, it wasn't Merrill's, it was actually Ezra Pound's cantos. So the Newton's first law of motion is a realization, is what I'm saying to you guys is, I have got the form down of cantos. I can do an Ezra Pound poem, but it's about science. So that's what happened. So I rhyme when I need to in this work, but I just go crazy, or try to, like bringing in movies and stuff like that. So, but I cannot write without engaging with science. So I haven't written, as I was telling earlier. I have to go back to doing physics or math in order to generate new poems. It sucks. Because it takes hours just doing, I was doing algebra. You finish one topic, then there's another one. Then the same thing with calculus. It just goes on and like poetry. Okay.
Oh, I was going to say, I really like the bear poem. It's one of my favorites.
Oh,
I mean, and part of it was because the perspective, where it put me was, or where I imagined the bear was that was part of what I liked about it.
I have a question too about that. Well, is that just your comment?
I guess it was just a comment.
Yeah. Did you really write these last week? Oh, that's true.
Why would I?
Yeah, I mean, I make stuff up. Yes, folks? Come on, just some random questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you, Mr.
Yes,
Hasan,
I
but,
know.
Grant, how long have you been writing poetry?
I mean, like I wrote poems as a child, and then didn't until I was a senior in high school, and we read the Deal Barrow Williams, and I was like, I want to do this. So then, yeah, so that's 13 years.
So yeah, I mean, I'm going to jump in here because you didn't ask me the question. So Grant is an example of a poet who publishes in his 20s and keeps publishing. And I'm the guy who starts writing poems really late. My first poem I ever wrote was when I was 30. So I come to it pretty late, and so I'm one of those people who are like, oh, screw Grant, because he has all these decades to pump out books while I'm like running out of time. But that's the two models. So famously, not Edward Thomas. Yeah, Edward Thomas is a good example of a poet who first starts to write poetry when Robert Frost tells him to, you need to write poems at 40. And he writes for 2 years, and then he's dead in World War II, or World War I, because Frost called him a coward, and he went off to prove Robert Frost, that he wasn't a coward, and he dies. It's like this tragic. Edward Thomas, great poet. Yes, oh my, yeah, Atia.
A comment that
Oh.
you said
Oh, reciprocal, which was this function? 1 over x, and Atia and me, we have studied that. And the graph for that goes like this. And this line and this line never meet.
It gets infinitely closer.
But never meets. And you did do some science poems. Haven't
Yeah,
you?
I didn't even realize.
Gravity, man, come on, it's my turf. So I'm sitting there all like, oh man, because you also have a science background.
Yeah.
We all tried to be scientists and failed. So who wants to know how old I am?
I do.
I just told somebody recently, but that's, I'm done with my.
Happy
Yes, that's true. Much closer to my death now. Thanks, man. Yes, folks? So, I'll just say something else. Oh, you are ready to go. Yes.
Do you have the last word?
We do have pizzas left, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we still have pizzas. Don't go without eating those. And the last time somebody did science poem was Lucretius, The Nature of Things, who was 1,000 years ago or something? 1,200 years ago. So it's not so new.
And if anyone
Please.
wants to donate,
And soil?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, pizza in the back, and
Folks at the front.
books at the front.
And get going. Start writing, folks. You know, some
Yeah. Also, any of the gray chairs.